Hello everyone! Welcome back to our ongoing Pokemon Care Guides. Continuing on in Pokedex order, we move on to the Fire Starter line of Kanto, Charmander, and its later evolutions. The Charmander line are all variations of a bipedal reptile with an orange or red colored back and a yellow belly. But their most recognizable feature is the flame that perpetually burns at the tip of their tail. That, in and of itself, is a dead giveaway that you're looking at a Charmander evolution. But anyway, Charmander itself is a 2 foot tall, 19-pound orange reptile with a smooth rounded head and big blue eyes. It's adorable. But there really isn't that much else to say about the first stage of this line. The next evolution, Charmeleon, while there isn't much difference between it and Charmander, does get a bit bigger at 3.5 feet tall and 42 pounds. It also has a new crest on its head and larger claws. The biggest change happens with the last evolution, however. Charizard gets significantly bigger than its previous evolutions, averaging 5.5 feet tall and almost 200 pounds. And yeah, I was surprised to find out that a Charizard is generally shorter than the average person, too. It always looks so much bigger on TV. Regardless, Charizard also sports a set of impressive wings used to lift it into the air. And for such a bulky looking Pokemon, it's surprisingly maneuverable in the air. But let's be honest here. You all know what a Charizard looks like. Between the multiple champions using one, it being the Kanto Fire Starter, and just the sheer popularity that Charizard enjoys, you've probably seen one somewhere. So now that we have a general idea of the Pokemon, let's go through and see if these could be the perfect Pokemon partner for you. Enclosure. Okay, since this is our first fire type, I'm going to say this here. Fire types can and will be some of the most challenging Pokemon to house, and for the exact reason that you're thinking. Fire tends to burn things to the ground and hurt people and other Pokemon. So, building them an enclosure, especially for the ones that have open flames in their bodies, will be a challenge. I should know. I got my Houndoom booster when he was just a newborn Houndour, and there are still burnt patches of my lawn from when he was learning how to behave. Taking all of that into consideration, only experienced trainers should raise fire types in my opinion, simply because a fire type can cause massive amounts of damage and injury if not raised right. That being said, if you still think that you can handle and raise a fire type correctly, a Charmander isn't the worst place you could start. To start, this is a Pokemon line that I highly recommend that you keep in an outside enclosure. It is very easy for the fire on their tail to catch a piece of furniture or a wall, and suddenly you've got a house fire on your hands. As well, Charmeleon tend to go through a sort of rebellious, destructive phase, and will claw up your walls and floor. It's probably going to get irritating to repair them all the time. And when you get a Charizard, having it live outside goes from a suggestion to a necessity. Charizards need to be able to fly to stay healthy. And unless you're willing to let your Charizard out every time it wants to go to the sky, or install a retracting roof on your house, it will need to live in an outside enclosure. Considering that it'll end up living outside anyway, it will probably be easiest to have it live outside just from the beginning. Now, when they were abundant in the wild, Charmander and its ensuing evolutions were all mountain-dwelling Pokemon. They would spend their time roaming rocky cliffs and going in and out of caves for shelter. So, for that reason, the enclosure for your Charmander should look like you stole part of a mountainside. Large piles of rocks for it to climb up and down so it can wear down its claws, rough rocky ground so they don't accidentally set anything on fire, and a cave that is big enough and deep enough that it'll let them escape from any bad weather or rain. Of course, as the Pokemon evolves, it will need more and more space for it to roam and a larger cave for it to bed down in. Now, I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, great, I don't have a large rocky area with a cave for my Charmander. I guess I can't have one. Well, hold on. You aren't the first person to run into this problem. And there is a solution out there if you're willing to pay for it. Certain companies around the world offer to build what they call synth mountain habitats for Pokemon like the Charmander line. It's essentially a rock like material similar to plastic that can resist the heat coming off of most of the fire type Pokemon. They can build you everything you need, and they charge by the half acre, usually. At a minimum, a Charmander will need at least a half acre for its habitat. They are a usually inquisitive species, so they need the space to explore and stay entertained. And when they evolve into a Charmeleon, they will need double the space, a full acre. After evolving, the Charmeleon will take that space and begin to claim it as its territory. This is why in the wild, while Charmander would linger in groups and stay together, once they evolved, they tended to separate and go out on their own. They each need to take their own territory. After evolving again, while similar Pokemon of the same size would need more space, a Charizard will only need about an acre and a half because, really, it will be spending a lot of its time up in the air, only returning to the area that it claimed as its territory for meals, resting, and to interact with its trainer. As for the cave, I would recommend getting one size for a Charizard right away. That means that the opening of the cave will be big enough for a fully grown Charizard. So, around 6 feet tall and 5 feet wide, slightly larger than the wingspan of an average Charizard. This will allow them to land and fly out of the entrance to their cave. Depth-wise, you'll want to make it about 10 feet deep. That way, it'll offer even larger than normal Charizards space to get away from the opening in the case of a bad storm. Again, if you don't live on the side of a mountain with the appropriate cave system, don't worry. The same companies that I mentioned before, the ones that make the synth rock, also make caves out of it for this exact reason. Just be aware that it won't be cheap. Pokemon that can be housed with them are, well, not many. Charmander, like I said earlier, tend to form packs together, so they like to hang out with others of their kind and even other kinds of Pokemon. And even when paired with grass types and fairy types, they won't usually attack or hurt them. But the instant they evolve, that usually changes. Charmeleon and Charizard will pick fights with whatever you have living with it. I'm talking about anything: water types, grass types, electric types, people if they aren't trained well. Anything is fair game to them because they need to establish a dominance hierarchy in their territory. And yes, while it has been observed that some Charizards sometimes ignore Pokemon that are obviously weaker than them, it's still taking a big risk to intentionally stick a weaker Pokemon with a Charmeleon or a Charizard and hope that it won't just attack it. If, and this is the only exception that I would make to this rule, but if the Pokemon was well trained as a Charmander and was properly and carefully socialized throughout all of its evolutions, then you may be able to have it coexist well with other Pokemon. Training is a big factor in that, and an important part of raising a Charmander line Pokemon effectively, which I'll go over in the care section of this guide. Availability. Unfortunately, due to the Charmander's status as a starter Pokemon, they suffer from the same thing as the Bulbasaur line. Actually, they may even be scarcer if you can believe it. The pure popularity that Charizard enjoys means that their catch window in the SPC, watch my Bulbasaur video if you don't know what that means, is nearly non-existent. Almost as soon as shiny breeders hatch and release one, they get caught by someone else. And of course, this non-existent wild population mixed with the popularity means that if you are able to find a private seller willing to sell you a Charmander evolution, it is going to be a lot of money. Thankfully, I have noticed in recent years that more and more private breeders are attempting to start breeding Charmanders. So that price may come down in the coming future, but don't expect it to drop soon. Between the needed synth rock environment, the fact that they can be so aggressive, and the government regulations on starter breeding, it can be a hardy investment just to start producing Charmanders. In all honesty, I would say your best shot is to get approved for the government starter program and sign up for a Charmander. It'll only cost you the entrance fee, and you'll usually only have to wait a year or two on the waiting list, which, yeah, may seem like a long wait, but trying to get it the other ways could take you much longer. At least this way, you are guaranteed one eventually. If you're over 18 already, then I suppose you could find someone and pay them to sign up for the program for you. Not terribly ethical, but if the person is eligible and okay with giving you the starter, then why not? But yeah, trying to find a Charmander anywhere will be rough. Care. Food for the Charmander line is both simple and a pain in the butt to take care of. The Charmander line are carnivorous, if you couldn't tell by the sharp teeth, and as such will require meat for their meals. For smaller Pokemon like Charmander and Charmeleon, I like to make a kind of meat mixture of Tauros meat and bird meat. The kind of bird doesn't really matter too much. It could be Pidgey, P-Dove, or even Talo or Starly. But the mixture of the two kinds of meat offers at least some kind of variety of the kinds of prey they would be getting in the wild. The only addition you'll have to add is some calcium powder and some multivitamins to promote growth and immune health. Now, the amount is a little tricky. If you look at the feeding amount of other reptilian Pokemon of the same size, you'll find that the Charmander line requires more food than the other species. This is because of the fire typing. The need to keep its body temperature high and to generate flame as a defense mechanism means that the fire Pokemon usually need more food than other types. Electric types kind of follow that rule too, but instead of more food in general, they need more sugar for energy production. So for a Charmander, you want to give them about 2 pounds of the meat mixture every 3 to 4 days. Remember that the Charmander evolutions are still reptiles, and so they don't metabolize as fast as most mammalian Pokemon. Yes, they are fire types, so they do metabolize fast for reptiles, but not when compared to mammals. The way their biology is set up is that if they get a good meal, then they'll be good for a few days afterward. Charmeleon's diet doesn't change too much from Charmander's. Of course, they are bigger, so when they evolve, you'll want to up their food immediately to 3.5 pounds of food every 4 days. Make sure to still dust their food with those supplements too. These supplements are to replace the stuff that they would get from the bones or the organs of prey that they get in the wild. Since they aren't getting that from the mixed meat we're giving them, the supplements that we are giving them make up for that. Now, when your Pokemon evolves for the final time, the food will jump up again not only because it's bigger, but also because it's becoming a flying type, so it's going to burn more energy flying around than its previous evolutions did by just walking. Because of its size and energy consumption, Charizard's food intake will bump to a whopping 5.5 to 6 pounds of mixed meat every week. The only benefit to you here is that while Charizard requires more food per meal, the length of time between meals is actually longer than its previous evolutions, because it's not growing anymore. But even so, 6 pounds of meat a week can be quite a bit of meat. I would suggest ordering in bulk and trying to keep it stored for as long as you can. As for exercise, I have one word for you: training. And I don't mean battle training either. I'm talking behavior training. Things like don't set people on fire, no biting, no setting other Pokemon on fire, no running away, no setting buildings on fire. Really, just making sure it doesn't burn anything or anyone to the ground. If nothing else, I would say that this is the most important part of taking care of your Charmander. Shoot, of caring for any fire Pokemon. For your and everyone else's safety, do not let the training fall to the wayside. Okay, now without warning out of the way, it is best for you to start training early when your Pokemon is still a Charmander. Charmanders are generally easier to work with, and if done at a young age, the habits will settle in their minds better. You can still work with the older evolutions, but it will be a much bigger challenge to change their behavior since it's already ingrained. Water in a spray bottle acts as a good deterrent for negative behavior, and small little chunks of meat, either Tauros or poultry, for positive reinforcement of good behavior. Now, I have never taken care of a fire Pokemon before, except for Booster, And when I got him, the lady that sold him to me took care of his training. So I can't give you the in-depth details of how to train your Pokemon. But there are a few things I know are good for training. First is socialization around other people and Pokemon. Getting your Charmander used to being calm around random people and Pokemon will help temper the fighting instinct they get as a Charmeleon or Charizard. Taking the later evolutions to a Pokemon gym every now and then, just to get some of their fighting instinct worked out, might be a good idea if there's one near you. It will help the Pokemon differentiate between time to fight and time to stay calm. Second is enrichment. Things that will tire out their bodies and minds are best, as it will keep them from getting into trouble. For Charmanders, just playing with you and toys will be good enough for them. Maybe get some of those toys that you can hide treats in, so they have to figure out how to get them out. That's good for their minds and tends to keep most Pokemon busy for some time. Charmeleon will require a bit more work than that, though. From my research, an obstacle course would be best. Nothing fancy, just some ramps, tunnels, maybe even use the rock piles that you'll have in their enclosure as climbing structures. As a Charizard, you'll still be using the obstacle course you have set up, but now you'll have to add in aerial maneuvers to that list as well. I'll be the first to admit that I don't know the first thing about teaching a Charizard to perform anything in the air, but there are plenty of books and people out there that'll be willing to help you. One good example of an aerial obstacle is you throwing hoops into the air and your Charizard having to fly through them before they land on the ground. Keep in mind that all of this exercise isn't just to keep your Pokemon in shape. Between the toys and the obstacle course, it will be giving your Pokemon something to keep their minds focused on. It's like giving them a job. They spend a lot of their focus on getting through the obstacle course, so then they don't have the focus to spend on getting into fights or trouble. Now, the last thing I'm going to go over care-wise for the Charmander line is actually not something that you have to do, but something that you have to keep an eye on, as it'll help immensely with knowing what is going on with your Pokemon. The flame on the tip of these Pokemon's tails are almost like a health and mood indicator. When the flame dwindles or shrinks in size, it means the Pokemon is either sad or injured or sick. If you notice that your Pokemon's flame seems smaller than normal, which as you spend time with the Pokemon and get to know them better, it'll be easier for you to tell when the flame is at its normal size. Then it would be best to take them to a Pokemon Center as soon as possible. The medical professionals will be able to help you from there. Now, if it goes the other way and the flame gets bigger and hotter, that's not a good sign either. With the Charmander group, this means that the Pokemon is angry or gearing up for a battle. Whatever triggered the response in them, whether it's you or another person or another Pokemon, then slowly remove whatever it is from the situation and give your Pokemon time to cool down. It's best to always keep one eye on that flame, especially when you and the Pokemon are just getting to know each other. It will make your life a lot easier and a lot safer too. Cost. So, the cost of these Pokemon isn't going to be as low as the Bulbasaur line. And the most expensive part, I guarantee, will be the enclosure. Well, I mean, unless you currently live near or on a mountain, then you don't have to do anything to set up for these Pokemon. But for those of us who are unlucky enough to not live near a natural giant rock, setting up the mountainous habitat won't be cheap. In fact, it's almost a certainty that it's going to be in the very high category. Needing to have a company make, haul, and set up fire-resistant rock will greatly cut into your wallet and honestly is the biggest deterrent to people and breeders hoping to own fire-type Pokemon. The best way that I can offer to mitigate this cost is to build the enclosure in sections. When you have a Charmander, build an enclosure that is just big enough for a Charmander. Then, when it evolves, expand it to the right size for a Charmeleon, and then do the same when you get a Charizard. In the end, you'll be paying the same thing no matter what, and if you can afford the whole thing right from the beginning, then I would absolutely suggest that. But doing it in sections can help spread that cost across multiple years. The Pokemon itself is going to be the same as Bulbasaur. After all, it is still a starter Pokemon, and suffers from the same rarity that they do. To that end, unless you get one from the starter program in Kanto, which I still stand by as the best way to get one of these starter Pokemon, then a Charmander will cost you just as much as a Bulbasaur, if not more. So this Pokemon is sitting squarely in the very high price category. And sorry, but there really isn't any way to lower that cost. Food as well is going to be just as expensive as everything else. For a Charmander and even a Charmeleon, you're looking at the high category for the meat and the supplements. And once you get the Charizard, it's going to jump up to the very high category, simply because of how much this Pokemon eats. Both the Tauros meat and the poultry are not too expensive in and of themselves, but the amount that you'll be having to buy is what is going to make this expensive. Buying this stuff in bulk will really help you out keeping this cost as low as possible. Then freezing any extra meat you have for the next feeding means that it won't be a weekly trip to the grocery store. Conclusion. So, when I started this guide, I knew that this species was going to be one of the ones that everyone wants. I mean, who wouldn't? But when all the facts are laid out in front of them, then they start to reconsider. Between the prohibitive cost of keeping something like a Charizard, the territorial attitude that is common among the older evolutions, and the massive time and training needed to make sure that this Pokemon is behaved and a good companion, it can be very time and money intensive to keep one of the Charmander evolutions. It's the reason that I never had one. Never had the time to devote to just the one Pokemon. Really, I personally only know one person that has one of these Pokemon, and that's the person I got Booster from. She, Bex is her name, is a Pokemon Ranger who runs a Fire Pokemon Rescue Center. And I'll tell you, she's a professional when it comes to Fire type Pokemon, and raising a Charizard has been a handful even for her. Now, I'm not saying don't get one. If you're up for the challenge and think you can do it, then go ahead. I simply want to make sure you have all the info before rushing out and getting one. Last thing I want is for someone or a Pokemon to get hurt just because they weren't ready for this kind of challenge. But if you listen to all of this and still think that one of the Charmander evolutions is right up your alley, then I'm glad that I could help you find your perfect Pokemon partner. Watch out for our next episode when we go over the water type Kanto starter, Squirtle. Have a good night, everyone.